We are live.
We're live. Hey, everybody. How's it going?
I want to say good to see you all, but I can't see you, but I can read you.
Yeah, that works. Good to read you guys. Hope everybody's doing good. Hope everybody's online. It looks like a lot of people are online. That is awesome. All right, we're going to start
So good.
as we do every single week. We're going to have some worship together,
Yes.
which I love. I think it's going to be awesome. So wherever you're at, why don't we do some worship together? All right, here we go.
And I will trust in only you. No one can add to your perfection. 'Cause you're the beginning and the end. More than I can comprehend. There is no one like you, no one. And I will trust in only you. No one can add to your perfection. 'Cause you're the beginning and the end. More than I can comprehend. There is no one like you, Jesus. I lift my hands to heaven, hear my heart surrender. Tell my soul again, you alone are God. And though the seas are raging, you will speak and tame them. You I find my rest, you're in control. In you I find my rest, you're in control.
Jesus, thank you so much for this opportunity to gather around what is us building your church, Lord, on a Tuesday evening. And Jesus, I just pray that tonight would be a great night. Jesus, I pray that you would actually speak tonight, Lord. Jesus, I thank you that you're not only reserved to speaking to people on a Sunday, but you can speak at any time of any day, Jesus, and we thank you for it. Jesus, we just pray that tonight you would be glorified by what we do here. In your name we ask it. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Awesome.
Amen.
Come on. Matching shirts, not quite.
Mine is navy blue.
Yeah. Almost.
Big difference. It is a nice hat, like.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is everybody doing good? Oh, yeah. I know that you're cheering at home or wherever
Did
you are
everyone have a
watching
good
this.
time celebrating my day, Victoria Day?
This was Victoria.
I can't believe not more people have thought about it. Maybe I'm self-centered.
This was Victoria's first ever Victoria Day ever.
Oh, wow. Yes.
And yeah, we didn't do that much. But
Gardening. It was fun.
anyways, next year we'll do something better, Victoria. We'll go to Victoria Park.
In Sweden, we have something called Names Day. So every single day, there's a guy name and a girl name who's
Celebrated.
Celebrated. Like it's your name's day. So my name's day is March 12th. So that's actually
you
my
can
Victoria Day.
Take that information and
Well,
throw
fun
it out of
fact
your
about
mind.
Sweden. I'm teaching everyone so much like random stuff about Sweden. You're welcome.
All right. Listen, we hope that everybody's doing well. We're really excited to be able to share tonight.
Yes.
Yeah.
We love TGT. I think it's just incredible. And bless you. And and we're really actually excited to continue and build upon what we started last week. Last week, we started to talk about our values as a church and how these values actually apply to us as leaders and apply to our teams and actually truly make a difference. And it's so important that we don't only know these values, but we actually embody these values, right? That we live out these values, that they're actually just a part of who we are as a church and as leaders in the church, and that everything we do is guided by these values. And the truth is, once we get them into us, we don't even have to really stop and necessarily think about it. It just is who we are, right? And it's important that we get that. And so this week, we're really excited to talk about these next 3 values that we have. And we're going to just jump right in. And the first one is this. Everybody have your notebooks ready? Awesome. The first is this. We are contributors, not consumers. Right?
So good.
We're contributors, not consumers. And I think that this is an awesome value. I just love this one. I think that this is one that, to me, this is actually a really fun value of ours.
Yeah.
This idea of being a contributor and not just a consumer. And, you know, there's an incredible miracle that takes place in the book of John. And we all know it. We've heard this many times. Brandon preached on it very recently. In our series that when we were doing Heart for the House. He's doing a dance beside me right now. But John chapter 6, right? Jesus feeds the 5,000, which, as we learned, is actually more like 15 to 20,000 people, which I love that little kind of fact about that story. But, you know, there's this little boy, right, with these 5 loaves and these 2 fish. And you see in this story that is told, in this miracle that Jesus performs, you see the fact that there were many, many people who were consumers on that day. A lot of people consumed that meal. Many thousands did. But I think it's so cool that this boy was a contributor that day to what God wanted to do. And I think that there's so much power in that. You see, he contributed what he had. It wasn't much, but he contributed it to Jesus. And when Jesus did what only he can do, all of a sudden it went out and it was able to be consumed by so many people. But I don't know about you, but I would rather be the contributor than the consumer in this story. I really would be. And so I think it's so important to remember this idea that we are contributors, not just consumers.
I think the cool thing as well about when we shift that mindset from being a consumer to contributor is actually that we shift our mindset from being me focused to others focused. So when we actually are contributors, we're actually focused on what we can bring to other people. How can we better the people around us? How can we better the people that we are leading? How can we bring what we have, the gifts and talents that we have, and bring it to the people around us, bring it to church, bring it to our workplaces, bring it to our families, and be a blessing in that way.
Absolutely. And I think it's, you know, it's one of these things when it comes to church, because I think a lot of people sometimes can view church like it's a country club or something. You know what I mean? Where we just go to consume. That's why Luke is wearing this hat. Exactly. This is what you wear in all country clubs in Sweden.
I don't even think we have.
Also, random fact, throw it out of your mind. It's not even a true fact. So don't even let it go into your mind. Anyways, the thing is, oftentimes we can look at church like it's just kind of a country club, and we go and we, you know, that's where our community is and that's where our friends are. And, you know, we love to consume, right? And we go and we get fed with the word of God weekly, and we get to go and we get to consume the worship, and it's great. And we get to consume all these kinds of things. And it's like a whole lot of consumption that goes on in church. And that's often the case. But I think we need to make sure that we're always flipping that, right? So we're actually contributing. In fact, every time we come into church, we should be asking ourselves the question, how can I contribute today to what God wants to do in this place? And not only in church on Sundays, but every single day. How can we actually contribute to what God is doing here in Waterloo? How can I contribute to someone else's life? What can I do for them? Maybe that contribution is as simple as encouragement. Maybe it's as simple as, I don't know, helping them out with something, but we need to be contributors and not just consumers. I love the idea of being a contributor and as actually being a part of the solution, right? And it's so cool that that really we carry with us what is the solution, don't we? You know, we carry with us the Spirit and the presence of God wherever we go. He lives within us. I mean, this is the solution that so many people are looking for in their lives. And the truth is they are consuming so many other things to try and fill what that void in their life is. And here we are. We have the answer. We can contribute that to other people. And in turn, they can actually become contributors as well. And so we need to remember, we just have to be contributors and not just consumers in our church. And this applies to us so well, I think, when it comes to our leadership. Because when it comes to our leadership, we have to also ask the question, are we enabling contributors or not, right?
Yeah.
Are we actually providing room for people to contribute, or are we just, because of our own leadership, maybe our own insecurity, I don't know, are we actually just forcing people to consume, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a great question, and I think it's a great challenge that we have to ask ourselves is how am I enabling my team members, the people that I lead, to actually contribute their gifts, to actually contribute the things that God has placed on their life to this church?
Mm-hmm.
How are we enabling that? How are we encouraging it? How are we providing the area for that to happen, the space for it to happen? Because we need to make sure that we are. Otherwise, we are just going to get people who come and maybe they're serving, but they can still just kind of be consuming, you know? But we actually want to create contributors, people who really understand the impact and the power that their contribution makes here at Slight Church.
I think it's important as well as leaders that we don't just consume the gifts of the people on our team.
Yeah.
You have a great gift, let me use you. And we just use people instead of actually raising them up to be leaders and actually helping them become contributors like Luke is talking about. And that often comes through being a little bit outside of our comfort zone, giving a person a go, delegating a task that you might not be sure of whether or not they might do it the exact way that you would have done it, but actually they can bring their own, they can contribute to it and actually maybe do it in even a better way than you would have done it. But I think that's a big one, not just consuming the people's gifts, but actually contributing, helping them contribute in the way that they can.
Totally right. We're going to jump into the next one here. And the next one is this. Our next value as a church is we believe the good news of Jesus should be accessible for all, right? We believe that the good news of Jesus is accessible, should be accessible for all people.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you've heard this before, but we're going to say it again. And I think it's great language that we took off Nathan Finocchio. But he said that, you know, we're a church for the up and out and the down and out, right? And everybody is welcome at Slight Church.
Yeah.
We need to remember that. Everybody's welcome at Slight Church. We love when people can come into church and meet with God. Everyone is welcome at church. And we want to make sure that the gospel, the good news of Jesus, is accessible to all people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, you know, every single person here knows that a few weeks ago we had Justin Bieber come to our church.
What?
And you didn't know that?
Totally missed that.
Unbelievable. But we all know that he came, right? And to tell you the truth, we did a great job as a church. It's actually like a really proud moment for us as pastors. The way that our church responded to that, I think it's really, really cool. And it's actually indicative of the fact that this value is already embodied in a lot of our church, which I think is amazing. But the fact that he can come, which is just unreal. He can come, he can worship, he can sit through a message, and he can actually hear the gospel of Jesus preached. I mean, that is incredible. Again, it's accessible to everybody. But what I love about that is that here's Justin Bieber sitting in the row. And I know that there are other people in church who are totally down and out. The kind of people who are addicted to drugs, the kind of people who are just, you know, they do not have life figured out and they're trying and they're searching for something and whatever. And they're able to come and receive as well. And we're a church for both people, and neither is more important than the other in the eyes of Jesus, right? Neither one. And neither in our church either. Neither one is the kind of person that's like, well, we're only a church for this kind of people. Or we're, you know, we would close our doors to the idea of a celebrity coming to our church. That's ridiculous. They don't, right? No, of course not. And of course, we're not the kind of church to say we would close our doors to the idea of a drug addict coming into our church. No way. We are a church for everybody, and we believe that the gospel is accessible for all. The good news of Jesus is accessible for all. We're going to make it as accessible for Justin Bieber as we can for the addict, as we can for the families with young kids, as we can for people from different cultures. You know, we've got a lot of people coming in from different cultures, and the people from all over the world, which I think is just amazing. You know, it is so cool. And you know, as lead pastors, we talked about the idea of in the future at some point being able to do like translation for our services and doing all this kind of stuff so that we can actually make the gospel accessible to people, right? And it's a cool opportunity that we have that we're able to actually do that. And I love the multicultural society that we live in today. I love that our church reflects the city that we live in. And I just think that we need to make sure that that's something that we hold on to and that we actually value, because it's actually really significant for us as a church. So we need to always make sure that it's accessible for everybody.
Yeah. And we see this in the example of Jesus. I mean, he spoke to the Samaritan woman. should not have done that, but he broke that rule. So that's awesome.
Yep.
He hung out with the tax collectors, again, people that were outside of society in many ways. He spoke to fishermen. He spent time with the political leaders. He spent time with everyone, young and old. He took time with them, and he met them where they were at.
Yeah.
And then it's the classic saying that Jesus meets us where we're at, but he doesn't leave us where we're at, because being in the presence of Jesus, it changes us. It just does. But we're all on a journey, and we want to meet people where they're at.
Absolutely. And making it accessible to people, right? Like we want to, we really want to take the Great Commission, right? Matthew 28, when Jesus says, go out into all the world and make disciples of all the nations. And I love, actually, Blake said it a couple of weeks ago, and I've heard it before, and it's just so like perfect, right? It's the Great Commission, not the Great Suggestion, you know? Yeah, and I just think that that's so good, and it's so true. And we need to make sure that as we're doing that, as we are going out into all the nations, as we're preaching the good news, and we need to make sure that we are making sure that we're making it accessible to people. And the question is, how are you doing that in your team, right? How are you facilitating this with the people that you are leading? Are you making it accessible for people? Are you making sure that in your team that we can make room for people with disabilities to serve in church?
Wow.
Right? And listen, I just think it's so cool that we are a church that is going to be so good at this, you know, that actually allows people with disabilities to feel like this is a place where I can go and not only consume, but I can be a contributor at this place as well. These people have not counted me out. And I think that that is so cool. And we have actually a responsibility to do that as well. And so we need to make sure that we're doing that. We need to make sure, how are we able to connect with people of different cultures in our teams and make sure that we're making the gospel accessible to them? How are we making sure that that our leaders in our teams don't just get caught up in doing church all the time and forget to actually be the church, right? And this is going to contribute to us actually making the gospel accessible to people. And, you know, again, another thing that I love about our church and how diverse it is, and the different types of people and the different interests of people and all that kind of stuff, is that honestly, I really think that there is somebody in our church that could connect with just about anyone, right? Somebody walks through the doors of our church and they've got interests and who knows what. I really believe that in our church, there is somebody that can connect with them, and that through that connection, all of a sudden they're able to make the good news of Jesus accessible to this person because they're speaking their language. You know what I mean? Just straight up speaking their language, whether it's an engineer that comes. We got a lot of engineers that can speak engineer language to these engineers that come through our doors. And I think it's awesome, right? I think it's great. We got a lot of creative people that can speak to, you know, the artist who's just kind of floating through life or whatever. We got a lot of students that can speak to students. We've got parents that can speak to parents. And I think that that's so incredible. And we need to make sure that we really champion that as a church so that we can really make sure that we can connect with people and make the gospel of Jesus accessible by any means necessary. Really.
And it's a good challenge as well, too. Even though I'm not an engineer, I would have a hard time figuring out how all these terms that they use, whatever, but I can grow in that. I can learn about other people as well. So don't just gravitate towards the people that you easily connect to, but challenge yourself to connect to a diverse group of people.
That's really 100%. I love that. We're going to jump into our next one. Value number 3, number 6 total, but number 3 right now. We are flexible in our methods, but steadfast in our mission, right? Flexible in our methods, steadfast in our mission. We often say our methods will change, but our mission will stay the same. And that's so true. And, you know, I really love the idea of innovation. In fact, it's in our mission statement, isn't it? That we're going to be a church that innovates. Right. And I love the idea of innovation. And I mean, there's so many great innovators in our world, and society and culture loves to celebrate innovators. You know, you have people like Steve Jobs, you have people like Thomas Edison, you've got people like the Beatles, right? You've got people like Elon Musk. You've got all these innovators across all kinds of different spheres of industry and doing these incredible things. And society loves to celebrate that. And one innovator that you might not know about, but I think this is really cool, is actually Victoria's great grandpa. Okay.
To feel that.
That was his name. What she just said. She didn't just sneeze. That was his name. But listen, he was actually very innovative, and he was an inventor. Okay. How cool is it to have a great grandfather that was an inventor? And In Sweden, he actually started this candy factory with his brother, and they still make candy today, which we should bring some at some point to one of our meetings, because you can buy their fudge, and it's got like a picture of the candy factory. It's incredible. But also, he worked for Volvo. All right, Saab. He worked for Saab, one of 2 Swedish car makers, and I got it wrong. He worked for Saab, but he was actually very important and very influential, and actually really helped lead the design and the invention of heated car seats. This is 100% true. So every time in the winter you turn your car heated seat on, you can thank Victoria's great-grandfather. This is 100% true. It's a crazy little fact. It's the most insane thing. But it really is when I think about it. It's like, what the heck?
He invented something else, something with windshield wipers.
He also worked on that, yeah. But anyways, it's just
together with an awesome team.
It's like the craziest thing. But he was like a major innovator. Okay, I mean, this was innovation. The truth is, everybody could have just been so okay with not having heated seats, right? Yeah. You could have been it would have been totally fine. Okay,
for having seats.
Why would we ever need heated seats, right? But it took one person to innovate and to think a little bit outside the box and put the idea in place. And now we all benefit from it, right? Yeah. And I mean, that's only one example of innovation. There are other innovations that have totally changed the world, things like the internet, things like, the way smartphones work and computers work, all this stuff. And it's completely changed the world. And we want to make sure that we're a church that innovates, that truly innovates. And innovation, a lot of the times, is thinking outside the box. Yeah. It's about bringing fresh perspectives to things. We never want to be a church that gets so caught and stuck in a way of doing something that it actually begins to work against us, right? You know, I think there's many examples of not only churches, but businesses, places where they begin to innovate and they achieve great levels of success. And all of a sudden they rest on that success and they think, well, this is the way we've always done it. So this is the way we're always going to do it. But society moves on. It evolves and it grows. And suddenly these exact same companies are just left in the dust. And new companies who are actually innovating come along. And so we want to make sure that as a church, we're constantly changing our method and building on our method and seeing what works well and thinking what's going to work well in the future. You know, we've got I really believe an incredible format for our services. Is that the way it's always going to look? I hope not. I don't think so. Are we always going to do worship the way we're doing it? I hope not. Are we always going to? No, because those are the methods of which we actually go about outworking our mission. And so the methods are going to change, and they're actually going to not only keep up with what society and pop culture is doing, but I believe that they're actually going to help define what society and pop culture are actually doing. And truly, I think that we're going to have methods that are going to reach more and more people than they ever have before, and can actually shift the landscape of what churches are doing on a much greater scale than just us. But we have to be willing to actually release our methods to things like innovation in order to see that happen. So we need to make sure that we're doing that.
Our message will only ever always, I don't even know, that doesn't make sense, but it will always be about Jesus. That will never change. And that's something we can never, ever compromise. And everything we do, we must always ask ourselves the questions, how does this reflect Jesus? How does this bring people closer to Jesus? That's the key. Otherwise, we're just an organization. That's the big difference between us and other organizations, the fact that as a church, we're about Jesus.
100%. And I think, you know, it's good to ask yourself the question as a leader with your team, and ask yourself, if somebody came with a new idea to me, how would I receive that? Because I think it's a sign of your security as a leader. Somebody came to you with a new idea, and it was a fantastic idea, and you knew it was a fantastic idea. Would you just shut it down right away because, you know, you're just happy with the way that things are going for things? Or are you actually open to, not only open to, are you actually encouraging people to, and this goes back to the contributors, not consumers. Are you actually encouraging people to and fostering an atmosphere and an environment where people can bring innovative ideas to the table, right? Because we always want that happening, that anybody's able to bring a great and incredible idea. And if it's a great idea, and a God idea, and it's something that, you know, we as pastors think, absolutely, that, you know, this is amazing. You know, God has really spoken through this person, then let's do it. You know, fantastic. We don't want to limit anybody's ability to think creatively and think outside the box and brainstorm and anything like that. We actually really want people to contribute those innovative ideas. And so you as a leader, are you secure enough to hear those ideas from your people? Or is it something that you will just shut down all the time? Because we need to make sure that we're open for it and that we're secure enough to say, that's an amazing idea. Understand that it's not a threat to your leadership. In fact, I think great leaders are able to foster that kind of that kind of creative thinking, outside the box thinking, and they're actually able to surface it. And it actually says a lot about your leadership if all of a sudden out of your team, incredible ideas are coming up, things that are really radically changing our church and making a big difference in people's lives. If that's always coming out of your team, it actually speaks very well of you as a leader that you're able to make that happen. And so I think we need to always be doing that. It's really important for us as a church. And always remember, never at the cost of our mission. Never. I mean, if it becomes more about the method than the mission, then we're losing the plot of this, right? Let's always make sure that the mission is actually the main thing. Keep the main thing the main thing. Methods, they will come and go. Mission, it will stay the same. And that is to make to see people far from God come into relationship with him through every single thing that we do. And right now, you know, we're doing a great job of making it work the way that we're doing church. In 50 years from now, we'll change things up. And who knows what it'll look like. We'll be worshiping on Mars together. I don't know. We'll be doing some weird space funk disco worship or something, which would be sweet. I have no idea. But our methods are going to change. These guys don't like the idea of space funk disco. They're shaking their heads.
James is excited.
Yeah, Jericho, you're going to be DJing it, man. It's going to be awesome. But listen, we need to make sure that we're secure. Innovation really takes security from ourselves. And we need to just allow these great ideas to rise in our teams. It is so incredibly important. It truly is for us. I
think it's important as well as leaders that we take the time to actually sit and think about new ideas to do our teams and to do things, and not just be so focused on managing. We actually don't give ourselves time or even time with our teams to brainstorm new ways of doing things. We should always be hungry for change, for growth. Well, really for growth, because that means change. You know, always thinking, is there a better way we can do this? Just because it's good now doesn't mean it can't get better. That doesn't mean that we're not going to be thankful for what we have or look down on what we have now, but there's always growth. There's always things we can change. And there's always going to be, as we expand our teams, as we have new people coming onto our teams, there's always going to be new ideas that come on to that team with that person. Are you actually paying attention to that? Are you opening up the floor for that person to come with their ideas and their new ways of thinking? And maybe it's not a great thought to begin with. Maybe, you know, sometimes it's you know, you have to, what's the saying? You have to actually shape the diamond a little bit. You know, it can be a rough idea to begin with, but as you brainstorm and you go back and forth, it actually is an awesome idea. So make sure that you give space for that in your team, and also give yourself time to sit down and brainstorm new ideas. But I agree with Luke that the best, if the best ideas from your team are coming from someone else on your team and not from you as a leader, that's a healthy sign for your team. That's a healthy sign of you as a leader.
And making sure that we're also always willing to fail forward, right? You know, with innovation is risky. We'll say that right away. It's risky to innovate. And so making sure that as we innovate, maybe some ideas won't work, but the ability to actually just fail forward, learn from that, and it actually sharpens us for next time. And you know, oftentimes innovators, they're paving the way, right? And people aren't quite understanding what is going on, and there's maybe criticism from the outside. I don't know, but oftentimes it doesn't make sense at first all the time, but then you look back and it's like, of course, that makes perfect sense, you know, in hindsight. And so also being willing to take that risk. And so I think a good question and a good challenge even for all of us is to just ask yourself, when was the last time you actually tried something new, right? In your personal life, when was the time that you innovated in your own life, actually developed a new way of doing something in your life, a new system? When did you actually innovate on yourself? And I think that's you know, something that we should all actually be thinking about as well. How can we do new things in ourselves? And then how have you innovated on your team as well? What kind of innovations have you brought? What kind of new ideas have you had? What kind of things are we doing to make sure that our methods are continually evolving, continually changing, continually moving, but our mission is always staying the same? And that is, again, to see people far from God come into relationship with him, right? And so that's a good challenge for us as well.
So good.
Awesome. Those are 3 wicked values.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
I love those. They're so fantastic. Cool. Hope that was good for you guys. Obviously, we had the values from last week as well. Definitely, this is not the kind of thing that you should just write down in your notebook and forget about. But this is actually the kind of thing to review and study. And like we mentioned at the beginning, to embody and to get it in you and challenge yourself. Why don't you challenge yourself even focus on one of these a day or one of these a week? I don't know what it is. And just focus and be like, this is what I am going to do this week. But get them all in you, right? Yeah. Do whatever you can to really embody these. And we're going to see some incredible things happen as we live out these values. All right? Awesome. Good stuff, guys. Now we get to move on to what is always fun and exciting. We get to move on to question time. I wish we had like a little theme song we could play. A little question and answer. And so we're going to invite Em and Brandon on into the picture. The Richardsons into the picture. And here they come. And yo. Yo. Awesome. Okay. So
we're gray and you guys are black.
Oh, that is so interesting.
Playing that way.
We tend to do this.
Convergence of appearance. I talked about that before, right? The longer you've been married, the more alike you start to look.
Those were big words.
I'm a lucky guy.
Dude, does my Ben hair? Does my Ben haircut look good?
Oh, wait a minute. You're not
so
Ben?
good. I'm not Ben. Oh, sorry.
I thought you were Ben.
I'm Ben.
So as we've talked about, we've done previous weeks. Now is the time for questions. So hold back on the feedback, even though we do appreciate it, so we can read some of the questions. We do have some questions from last week, but we also already have some new questions.
All right. Why don't we grab a couple from last week?
Yeah.
And then we will. All right. Yeah. And then we'll do the ones from this week. Here we go.
Look how much I'm squishing you.
Yeah.
In the frame.
We should do the class photo post where you go to the side.
All right.
Good thing we're family.
I'm gonna throw this question out there, and someone's gonna field it. All right. This is a ground ball going to third base. One of you guys playing third base, you're gonna field this. Where's the balance of having your captains helping with TTFFSS, Text Tuesday, Follow Friday, Saturday, and building relationships while still connecting and knowing your team? You get that? Where's the balance of having your captains helping out and building relationships while still connecting and knowing your team?
That's a good question.
Great question. Asked by the one and only Sarah Burgess.
Woo, fantastic. Sarah.
All right, this is a ground ball hit to this side of the diamond.
This side over here.
Yep, sure. One of you.
Yep. I think that a big piece of this is actually choosing to be relational and realizing that relationships are often built on many small interactions, not just one massive conversation. So what are you doing on a Sunday to connect with your team? Are you saying hello? Are you having genuine interest on what's going on in their life? Are you able to follow up in person about something that you heard them talking about last week? Work on your memory. Try to remember things that people are telling you. If that means carrying around a little notebook or having your phone and just jotting a couple things down so that you can revisit it, do that. Because that's the little interactions that are actually going to go a long way with knowing your team. On the other side of it is that you're not going to know every detail about everybody on your team. As teams grow larger and we're implementing this TFS to try to, I've shortened it. Like everybody knows that it's TTFF. TFS. You know, those
tax-free savings account.
The reason why
you are Ben.
That was for all of Ben's team that's listening right now.
You know, the reason why that's in place is to stay connected, to make sure you're building culture, all of those types of things. But that's just the beginning of those relationships. It's not the end of them. So it's being creative, but it's also just being generous with words of affirmation, smiles, conversation when you can have it. You don't have to go out just one-on-one with people on your teams when you're just building relationship with them. Get 4 people from your team together, get together for coffee or an early morning breakfast before work or something like that. Once every couple months even, and just catch up on what's going on in their lives to get to know them. So just be creative. What can you do? But also don't feel like if you don't know every detail about everyone's life on your team, that's bad or wrong necessarily. Try to get to know them, make a genuine effort, but also realize that you are leaning on other people like your team captains to build those relationships and to pastor. This is something that we've all had to face of we can't know every single person in the church personally. We can't have everyone over for dinner. We can't do everything with everyone. So we've had to be really generous with those smiles and conversations and being able to reach out to people as we can, but also trusting leaders to be able to do that as well. So it's a both and.
And it's also, you are focusing obviously on building relationship with your team captains. So they are helping you with the relationships with the people that are on your team, but you should also very much be pouring into your leaders.
Great stuff. It's I really like the group hang thing, and just make sure that nobody, like, you make sure that everybody on your team is connected to somebody.
Exactly.
You're not going to relate to everybody, but just make sure that they are relating to somebody if you're not able to.
Which is a good thing than hanging out with a group of people, because then
the group hangs. It's an awesome idea. We've done that many times.
Here's a good question from Alicia that came in. Among the LPs, what have you most recently innovated? Need some inspiration.
That's a good one.
Well, when Luke asked, what have you tried new recently? I pointed to this can of delicious
Are you failing forward?
Juice.
Or is it
cane sugar soda?
Cane sugar. It's amazing. It tastes like what candy did I say?
Sour Patch Kids.
Sour Patch Kids. I'm saving a little sip for Luke because I thought he'd really like it.
All right, this has just turned into a food review vlog.
This is an official review.
Taste test. Official review.
What does it smell like?
I'm a Sour Patch Kid
That was a good example
aficionado.
of love between siblings.
Okay.
What does it smell like?
Zero smell.
Good. Taste. This is a short draw. We'll get a long draw in a second.
No, we're not wasting this. This is gold.
Long draw.
It's delicious.
Just gave himself 17 cavities.
Yeah, it tastes like a yellow Sour Patch Kid.
It does.
Oh, a yellow.
There
Maybe
we
orange.
go. Winner.
Ooh.
Anyways, there's my
that was
innovation.
totally random.
What have you guys innovated recently?
Well, I mean, just something as lead pastors. I mean, we are always trying to innovate, certainly. I mean, the fact that we're talking to you digitally right now,
That's true. That's good.
we're trying to innovate with that. But maybe personally, Brandon, I know that you're always like changing up your ways of doing things.
Your routine.
Yeah. Sorry. All right. Well, let me. All right. So, all right. Yeah. On a personal, like, leadership level, I maintain, like, if you've ever used Evernote, it's the best thing created by mankind
really great.
since the fire. And
It's the best innovation.
can you make a more broad statement than that? Since the printing press. And but no, on Evernote, I basically track my entire life. So I have start day routines, I have work day start routines, end day routine. I track everything in Evernote. So I have a whole system that tracks our teams that I lead, tracks my life, tracks our family's life. And it all works together so that I actually get results. So that's one way I've been innovating personally, but also as a team. I mean, some of you will start to see this from your team leads and your ministry leads showing this to you. But we also made a leadership matrix. It's something that is kind of unique to a church setting, where it just describes like what the expectations for every level of ministry is across a variety of spectrums. And so we're all like, I know for you, hearing it might not like sound super exciting, but it was a piece of innovation. We saw it done in a company that Nate worked at a long time ago, got fired from for being a terrible worker. And
Not true at all.
I was waiting for Nate's reaction. I'm literally staring at him right here. And so slowly he was like, "Oh, he mentioned my work. Oh, he mentioned my thing. Oh, wait, no." But Nate brought it. Nate was an incredible worker there. And but he brought this, and we, like, a couple of years ago, we're like, hey, this is interesting. We started getting a feel for it, and it influenced some of our decisions at the time. But then more recently, we started and finished the matrix. And it's really gonna change the way that we manage the church. So we're always like innovating like tools within the church. Yeah. And then of course, I mean, even just the idea of a podcast and some of the ideas within the podcasts that are coming are actually quite innovative as well. They're not like any of the podcasts that you've heard. So even on that sense.
Totally.
I'm being innovative in my workouts. I'm doing home workouts. I'm quite proud of myself.
That's very good. That's an innovation.
It's the small things.
But kind of related to this a little bit, Josh Legacy, how often should we sit and intentionally brainstorm new innovations for our teams? I don't think that there's a necessary number that is like, oh, you should do it this many times per week, etc.
Yeah.
And the truth is, innovation comes in different forms, right? And ideas and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes it can come from sitting intentionally with a piece of paper and a pen and going through stuff. And if that's the way it can work for you, I think that's fantastic. And to tell you the truth, I think that's the way it can work for most people. Just some intentional thinking towards something can actually go a long way. And so, I mean, as much as possible, it's a great way to do it. But also just having this openness wherever you are, I think is a great way of going about innovation. Just kind of getting glimpses from, what are incredible, really innovative companies doing, and not just to rip off their innovation, because that's not very innovative, but actually to be inspired by and think like, oh, this is a new way of thinking, and this is different, and maybe combining things from different industries and putting these things together. And I think that then it's actually very innovative to do that kind of thing. And so just having like this ongoing type thing happening where you're just always aware of inspiration. Great.
Craig Rochelle wrote a book called Weird. And at one point it was like my yearly read when it first came out. So I read it for like 2 years. And I was going to commit to it longer than I found some even greater books that I read every year now. But it is a really great book on like personal culture. Just read it. It talks about how like normal isn't working, so let's be different. Yeah. It's kind of a catchy or a clickbait title, but in it he talks about this idea of he went to his counselor, and his counselor said, hey, like a lot's going on in your mind right now. Like you need to just take 5 minutes a day and just think. Like just take it to do basically nothing and just sit and whatever thoughts come, that's fine, but do nothing. And he said he was at such a point in his life he couldn't even just sit in a room by himself in silence and think for 5 minutes. Yeah. And I think it's actually probably one of the biggest things that's plaguing leadership today is the ability to be alone has like just is gone. Like you got to be on your phone, you got to be talking to somebody, and it's actually killing like creative thinking. And when we're talking about innovation, like it's not even like always these groundbreaking things that, I mean, we're inspired by Steve Jobs, we're inspired by the Beatles, we're inspired by all these great, and we will continue to aspire for those kind of inspirations, but or innovations. But the truth is those kind of innovations only come once in a lifetime. And we intend on doing something at that level at some point. But often it's just a bunch of little innovations that actually make up really great innovation. It was the culture that was set at Apple that actually created what they were able to do. It was the environment the Beatles found themselves in that actually allowed them to do what they're doing. But there was a lot of sitting around and thinking and wondering, as Victoria was saying earlier, how can I do this better? How can we do even better? How can we do even better? And how can we do even better? You're just always thinking, how can we get to the next level? So
on that, just real quick, it's either the current CEO or the just prior CEO of Twitter has booked into his calendar every single day, and this is a busy guy, 1 hour of just pure thinking time, right? Wow. Just him alone thinking. That's it. Just time for himself to think over whatever needs to be thought of. And I mean, a lot has come out of those times for him.
So maybe do a half hour because an hour is not working for Twitter.
Yeah, that's what that's why he's a former CEO.
But no,
just while we're on the topic,
don't lose the point through that silly joke.
Just while we're on the topic of innovation, Nate asked a great question. What are signs of a healthy balance of big thinking or innovative thinking and managing and leading well for the stage you and your team are at now?
Golden.
So the balance of
that's like a leader question.
Big thinking. Yeah, I think that Nate might be a leader. Of big thinking, and then also where you're at now.
I mean, it's kind of like this is the first thing that comes to my mind. Like Victoria and Emma, you guys can correct this or whatever, but I think it's like whatever season you're in determines what you do with that thinking time. So if you're in a season where like you just know management's not going well, then that's what you're going to devote that thinking time to. But you're kind of innovating within that, right? Like if something's not working, then you're innovating. Anytime you invent something new within your team or a process or whatever else, that's still innovation.
Exactly.
And so I think it just depends on on like what you're innovating. There's 3 aspects of leadership. This is actually directly from Peter. We all use it as a frame of mind.
Yeah.
And Peter just like in a car one day said this, and we're all like, yes, this is what we're looking for. As a leader, this is kind of like the centrality of leadership. And I'm not sure what way your screen goes, but it doesn't really matter. 1, there's an arrow coming out the one side of it, and it represents vision. But going back is management of tasks, and going back is management of people. And so these are the 3 aspects of leadership. In order to go forward, you have to continually look back on what you're doing task-wise and what you're doing people-wise. This is management. This is vision. And all is required in order to get to where you need to go. You need to make sure that your tasks are coming with you as you move forward with vision. You need to make sure your people are coming with you as you move forward with vision. And so I would say in your thinking time, you're always going to balance amongst one of these 3 things. Are you thinking about vision? Are you thinking about people? Are you thinking about tasks? And I think it's a seasonal thing.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I think actually the seasons where you're finding that you have to take care of things the most, where things are difficult, is actually the seasons that breed the most innovation every time, right? I think it's in the seasons where things are just smooth sailing, where innovation actually lacks. Yeah. But when things are, you're actually having to like figure stuff out together and, you know, manage and do all this. I think innovation is just birthed from that, like truly.
I'm going to step out on a branch and say, if you're not uncomfortable, you probably should be worried.
Sure.
Wow,
sure.
come on, skin.
I don't mean in the sense of like you're going to bed and you're staying up all night because you're worried about what's going on in your team. No, that's unhealthy. Just like if you were to run a marathon without doing any training, you're probably going to pass out. But in order to get better, as like recently, like just been taking some strides, some different goals within cycling and at the gym. And the truth is that you will never get to those goals. They're like far out. They're a year out. I'm not going to reach them for a year. That's my training. But I'm not going to get there if I'm not uncomfortable now. Every day I just get a little more uncomfortable. And now when I go back and do some of the things I was doing, you know, say 6 months ago, I'm like, how was I uncomfortable with this? Yeah, exactly. It's slowly letting on and slowly adding weight and an uncomfortable measure to your life that allows you to actually grow as a leader. You should always be thinking through something in leadership. If things are just going well, or not well, sorry. If things are just being maintained and you're comfortable, a few things might be happening. 1, probably something's happening that you're not aware of. 2, you are aware of something, you're just turning a blind eye to it. Or 3, you've probably plateaued as a leader and you just need a bit of a spark. There's an element of being uncomfortable that's actually healthy as a leader.
Yeah, it can become a bit of a good enough mentality. And we want to make sure that we're not just doing things good enough as a church, because then we're going to get stuck and our methods actually are just going to be good enough right now. But, you know, in a year from now, they're actually not making the cut. Yeah. And 2 years from now, we're actually not reaching the people that we're looking to reach. And like, there's all these types of things. If we just settle for good enough, we miss out on kind of the other things.
And you will have days where you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't take any more of this. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to say that that's going to be a part of your leadership journey. Yeah. And it's actually okay to feel like that sometimes. Yeah. Like, don't feel like, oh my gosh. And you need to decide in those moments what to do with it. Did you overextend yourself for a season? Have you been overextending yourself for too long and need to have actual conversation with my leader about this, or another leader above them if they haven't been responding? It's actually okay to be like, I've overextended myself, but also know that doesn't mean that you can't keep taking steps forward. It just might mean need a week where it's just a little bit more relaxed, but don't get stuck in that relaxed period. Yesterday, I woke up 6:30 in the morning. We did 75 kilometers on the bike, and then I immediately started chopping up wood and feeding it through a feeder for the next 6 hours, and then did some other stuff the rest of the night.
That's why you're so tanned.
And that's why I'm so burnt. But today, quite honestly, I'm like, I'm never going on the bike again. I'm never going to do any more yard work. That's how I woke up feeling. I'm just like, oh my gosh. But I know in reality, I just overextended myself for a day. I know I'm going to be back on the saddle tomorrow. And I think for those of you that are going through maybe just a difficult leadership season, just know that that's not the end of your leadership. You shouldn't be worried. You just need to know what to do with your feeling. And sometimes it's just reminding yourself, you know what? Probably because I overextended myself. I'm going to pick myself back up, get better organized, and I'm going to move forward or have a conversation about it.
That's really good.
Let's jump to this question from last week. How do you find balance between being someone's friend and also leading them?
You can't.
I think that's a good question. It's a really good question. I actually think you can be both. You can lead your friends. But it's, I think, understanding, especially when you're hanging out with people on your team, the fact that you actually are their leader as well. So that you're not just their friend. You're also leading them. And even what we talked about with the expectations, like perception is reality. I'm definitely their friend, but also I am their leader. What example am I setting?
And, you know, we've all probably heard this before, but the idea that leadership is lonely at the top. So that means that you should take someone with you, right? And it's true when it comes to leadership. Like, make sure that you're taking people with you. I think great leaders actually have great friendships with people, and even with people that they are able to lead. It's 100% doable. I think it's a myth that you can't be a friend and lead somebody at the same time. You know, it certainly requires open communication. It certainly requires honesty with one another, trust with one another, all that kind of stuff. It really does. And as Victoria is saying, I mean, I think the coolest thing is actually when you're a leader, I mean, again, leadership is influence, right? And I think it's incredible when you're able to influence your friends, people that you're really close with, to actually live a better life, right? And call them to a higher standard. And not necessarily, you know, doing it explicitly, like, oh, you need to step up. Although that at times that's what friendship is all about, right? But other times, just through the way that you live your life and the people that you're friends with, and you can model a healthy lifestyle and a great way of living and living a life full of vision, it will actually, in turn, I think, call your friends to a higher standard. It will challenge them as well. And so you can definitely be friends and lead the same.
It either challenges or pushes away. Emma had a recent situation where I think it pushed some friends away because we actually challenged them a little bit. And we're not like, we don't regret that because we're the only ones in their lives to be able to say something that we saw that was going on. And so we don't regret that, and don't even regret in the way that we approach it, because we actually approach it with a lot of love and a lot of grace. But sometimes it needs to be said because you're the person that God's placed in their life to say it. Also, when you make friendships as a leader, expect that you're going to fail, and every once in a while go home and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that with I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have did that. That's like basically my entire life is going, I shouldn't have done that. But picking myself up and always making sure if I'm going to take a step back, I'm taking 3 steps forward. Because actually there's some value in people you lead seeing your humanity. Now, I'm not giving you an excuse to mess up. What I mean is, don't be afraid of messing up. Like, be yourself, because yourself should be able to lead people. And having the humanity actually allows people around you, your friends, to see how you actually lead through being a human. It's actually something that a lot of people don't see. They always see these leaders that are doing these things and they don't know how they do them, and oh, I can't be that because I'm not them. You get around leaders, like, we get to hang out with some of the best leaders now in our country, but even around the world, and they are as normal as us, and it gives us a lot of hope for where our church is going.
Well, I think that it checks your integrity a little bit too when you're both friends with someone, but you're also pushing them forward as a leader. If they're seeing, it's almost like not too many people on TGT have kids, but it's the same idea that if your kids are seeing you one way at home and seeing you a totally different way at church, you're missing something there. And they're going to see the inconsistency. And it's the same with your friends. If you are so different with your friends than you are with the people that you're leading, you need to check that out, and you need to see what's actually going on. Maybe you need to bring a bit more humanity to your leadership and not just be that everything's all good all the time, so great, you know, when meanwhile something's actually not going too well, and you need to be able to address that in the appropriate way. It's also important that with your friends, you're not just totally goofing off and being completely inappropriate. And if other people that you lead alongside were in the room with you, they would be like, wow, I didn't know that you were acting like this, or that this is something you embody. So
also, your friends a little bit now, take this with a bit of a grain of salt, because it doesn't always apply, but often it does. Your friends can be a little bit of a thermometer for how your leadership is going. Is your friend group actually like moving forward together, like actually taking ground together, actually honoring God more and more each day? Or are they actually getting a little bit worse when they're around you? And don't say it's because somebody else is a part of the friend group.
Come on.
You're the leader. You're the one that's on
Yeah,
this
that's
team
so
recognizing
great.
and
That's so
learning
good.
leadership every week. So
Yeah, and who's leading who?
Come on.
Because maybe you think you're the leader, but you're actually not the leader in the friend group. You know what I mean? Maybe you're their leader in positionally, but you're not their leader influentially.
Throwback.
And
Throwback
that's
Tuesday.
actually a really big one. So there's a great temperature there. And so listen, just take that and let it challenge you. I hope that it does, certainly. And it's a good way to actually move forward in your leadership.
Who leads who in our friend group?
And Victoria
The girls.
and Emma lead everything.
We know
Victoria
who
so
we know who
nicely
leads
just
who
kind
here.
of smiled and knew, and I immediately said me. So really, it's Victoria all the way around.
The Swede. We don't understand what she's saying half the time.
It's very strange.
I'm teaching Kenzie how to count to 5 in Swedish.
She's learning.
Yeah.
Fett bra.
Let's do some wins.
Listen, just a couple wins.
We do a
Great
couple
questions,
wins.
by the way. We'll hit
Yes.
on some that we didn't hit on
We
this
do
week
want
next
you to
week.
keep sharing wins on the TGT base camp. Love hearing, because we're not going to be able to hear all the wins today, but there are so many. Hola! There's so many wins that we do want to hear them, because it is
Right.
it's encouraging and it's strengthening our teams.
Write a
So
couple
good, so
real
good.
quick.
Write them
Go
out.
for it. Go for the wins, guys.
And make sure that after today, you actually sit down and think about some of the things that we've talked about today, how this applies to yourself, but also how it applies to your teams. Don't let this opportunity just pass you by, but actually think about how you can implement this in your life and in your teams.
So good.
Got to meet Mr.
Nate Smith.
Smith. Okay, good.
Good for you, Jared. Who is that?
Should I know? I'm not saying anything.
You rock too, Daniela.
Had some
That's
really
not a
great
really-
conversations.
Oh, this is his win.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Had some really great conversations with people. I can
That's
relate
so
to
good,
that.
Jared. We had lots of kids
Mhm.
in the.
Wait, is
4
next
o'clock
week
service?
in person?
It is.
Next
Did
week's
we
in
already
person.
say that?
No, we didn't.
Hey, it's
In
in
person.
person. We're talking about a really great topic.
Yes.
You'll want to be there.
Also,
Really great
Are you
topic.
going to say what it is?
Yeah, you go for it now.
Okay. We're going to be talking a little bit of surrounding mental health and leadership.
Yes.
And a lot more out of that. But that's the
It's really
teaser.
good.
That's the teaser.
Met a woman on Sunday who drives from Godrich with her family because her kids love
Wow.
Slate so much.
That's so
Absolutely.
Yes,
They're
love
awesome.
that.
Love them.
My friend from school, I've been inviting out, heard about Slate from a girl at his work who doesn't even go to Slate. That's
Boom.
awesome.
Yes.
You know something's viral when
Julia was on Card
It's like-
Park. She did
It's
so
equivalent to dating a
good.
friend.
It's it.
Anyway, this Sunday, my dad is speaking. Who are you
Yeah.
inviting? It's gonna be fun.
It really is going to be great. We're
If you guys
excited
think
for it.
I'm crazy,
I'm trying to be like I'm trying to be like Jericho right now.
I'm so pumped. So you should be pumped too. PJ, his name is Patty Yuan, but we call him PJ. Try and say his last name. Patty Yuan.
Patty Wong.
Per Johan.
Johan.
Nate, that was
Patty
great,
Wong.
man.
Oh.
How do you
Nate-
want?
He says
Nate's
it with
a
just a
Swede.
solemn looking face.
All right, guys.
Sounded
Listen,
more like a Finn than a
fantastic.
Swede.
Fantastic TGT tonight.
Yes.
Really,
We're just trying to delay our
Really good
goodbye.
stuff.
We're trying to give you guys that, like, we don't want that separation anxiety to happen anymore. So we're just,
Like
Oh, I
we're
know
just-
this.
goodbye.
Youth pastors back in Woodstock stopped me and said, "You go to Slate, right?" I heard Bieber was there. So good. Thank you
Okay.
all for tuning in. We love you all. Have
Love
a
you
great rest
guys.
of your night
We'll see you on Sunday, obviously,
Yes.
but next week in
in person.
Oh, Sunday, 11/4, 6:30. Next steps happen